Hello and welcome into the NESN Pregame Chat. My name is Zack Cox. I'm here, as always, with Dakota Randall and Matt Chatham. Reasonably big game here today, sure. I guess you could say, here at Gillette Stadium. It will be, of course, Tom Brady's first game back here in Foxborough, his first game against the team that he spent two decades with, right. Won 6 Super Bowls with. It's been almost a Super Bowl type atmosphere this week, just with the hype and the spectacle going into this game. And now tonight we are finally going to see how these two teams match up, how Bill Belichick matches up against Tom Brady. It's going to be fascinating to watch. Just off the top, before we get into our offensive and defensive keys here, just a little housekeeping, some injury notifications. Rob Gronkowski, who was the other half of this reunion night, will not play. He did not make the trip. He's dealing with a ribs injury, which is reportedly a couple cracked ribs, a punctured lung. Pretty serious stuff from what it sounds like for Rob Gronkowski. So he will not be active for the Tampa Bay Bucs here today. Buccaneers also dealing with a lot of injuries in their secondary. Their cornerback depth situation is really kind of a mess right now. No Sean Murphy-Bunting in this game, no Jamel Dean, and yesterday Carlton Davis, their other starter, was added to the injury report and is questionable for this game. And according to a report this morning, Richard Sherman, who just signed with the team this week, will be starting this game. So it's going to be a very interesting matchup to watch how Mac Jones and this Patriots offense combat that injury-depleted Bucs secondary. But let's jump in right now. Offensively, speaking of Mac Jones and this Patriots offense, Matt, offensively, what are you going to be looking for from the Patriots in this game?
Just put it this way, if you want to talk about the offense of Mac Jones, you got to talk about what's around him and what they need to do to set the table to make him have some success. And I think if we, these are discussions that Zach and I are having back in like July and in August, sitting over here at the practice fields. And if you would have told me that, the offensive line is going to have some struggles in protection, an offensive line that my opinion of is through the roof. If you were going to tell me that, hey, this team might not be able to run the football very consistently, they're going to be someone who might have to resort to some 5- and 7-step drop over and over again with this rookie quarterback. Everything I thought, I know now I changed my mind, right? And I think they're sort of in the situation going into this game where you have to get back to scenarios that make a young guy comfortable. And we saw a lot of this a week ago, take your shot on first down, maybe take a second shot on second down, somewhere in there mixed in a 1 or 2 yard run. You just don't want to put a young guy in 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 7, 8, or 9, 3rd and maybe 12 and uncomfortable when we start talking about penalties and things like that. I know it's boring. I know it'd be more fun to talk about Mac chasing Brady with both guys in 45 pass attempts and you have some sort of Justin Herbert kind of like shootout, but I don't think that's great style-wise for this team. Now, as we do this shot right now, we're not certain if Trent Brown's going to be in his old role, but I think it is imperative, presuming a full group, back to that sort of profile. Trent at one side at right, Isaiah Wynn, who was on the injury report this week as well, presuming a modicum of help with him, getting back to being what their identity really is. And that's someone who can create space and make play action real so Mac doesn't have to go back at 7 yards and pray that the protection holds up. They got to get back to running the football at least iteratively, at least every 2 or 3 times, and not for 1 yard, not for 2, not for 3 when you need 5. They need to consistently be able to get 3 or 4 so that his play actions have some merit, so that he can go back and do drop back passings in moments where, it's second and short, and let's drop back pass because we can take a shot now, not because we have to get it because we put ourselves behind the 8 ball. That's the life of a better life for Mac Jones. They got to get back to it. I think it could be potentially a big day for Damian Harris. Needs to be, but the holes have to be there. If they can't make them, don't put it all on this young quarterback trying to face off against Tom. That's just not a fair matchup.
And that's a big matchup in this game because the Bucs defense has had its issues this season. It hasn't been able to rush the passer very well. Obviously, I mentioned the injuries in the secondary. They have been very good at stopping the run so far coming into this game. They rank up near the top of the league in most run defense categories. So definitely will be worth watching how Damian Harris and that Patriots offensive line can combat that. Dakota, offensively, what are you watching in this game?
Well, you guys both touched on it. I'm looking at the backfield for the Patriots, and specifically, I want to see what the strategy is and how it evolves as the game progresses. Damian Harris, I think we all expect to come out as a lead running back, as he should. But after that, I just want to see how it looks. Ramondre Stevenson, first of all, is he active? We don't know. And if he is active, does he slot in as the primary backup? J.J. Taylor, does he fill in for James White in third down situations in the passing game? I don't know. Again, we don't know what the roles are going to look like with James White now done for the season with that hip injury. So I want to see just sort of what the plan is for the Patriots, but also if things go sideways, as you're saying, if there aren't any holes for the running game, and if they struggle in pass protection, picking up blitzes, something Bill Belichick talked for 5 minutes and nearly 800 words earlier this week. And Damian Harris looked like he got benched last week, and we were talking beforehand, we couldn't tell if it was for performance or struggling in blitz pickup. But if he's struggling in those areas and they don't trust Stevenson and Taylor, do we get a lot of Brandon Bolden again? And listen, that's fine. If that's what you need to do to win, that's okay. But for me, entering the season, the Patriots backfield had a lot of promise and intrigue, and I still think it does, but there just hasn't been any consistency in terms of performance or defining roles, and I'm hoping maybe they can get to that today.
Before you pop to the next point, I know Zach's up here next, I wanted to touch on the notion of if you have believable and serious legitimate problems with your backs as far as protection, just understand out there, folks, there are other alternatives. It's great when you got a James White. When you don't, if you can't trust your back in protection, you can still protect with a sixth. You know, you have 5 offensive linemen, the 6th can be the second tight end. Or you may be just stuck leaving a tight end in. Because if these backs are still, you know, like J.J. Taylor, it's like, okay, we can't have a 6-man protect where he's one of the 6. You can send him out of the protection. Just unfortunately, it requires you to leave your tight end in. Or maybe 2 tight ends and one goes out and one stays in. But understand why that matters. It's Todd Bowles, right? Todd Bowles is the pressure guy in the NFL. If you're facing a defensive coordinator on the other side that's going to bring it,
Loves the blitz.
It's that guy. So that's why this conversation we're having about blitz pickup matters so much. But just don't think that, oh, we don't trust in your backs to do it. Doesn't mean you still can't protect with more. But don't you dare leave just 5 in a rookie quarterback, because that makes the ball get out quickly into where you just often don't know.
And we've seen very little so far this season from Ramondre Stevenson or J.J. Taylor. Stevenson, healthy scratch the last 2 games. Taylor has been active, has only played a handful of snaps. I think he's played 15 snaps all season. So you got to imagine one of those guys will be taking on a larger role, at least one of those guys with James White out, but going to be very interesting to see which one of those guys is in that role. Offensively, for me, I think the Patriots they need to start finishing in the red zone. That's really been a major issue for this team so far this season. First 3 games, 8 red zone trips, 2 touchdowns. You can't even really sum up their issues down there in one sentence. It's been penalties, it's been poor execution, it's been some questionable play calling, it's been some conservative passes from Mac Jones. They've just really struggled in every area once they get down close to that end zone. I mean, their red zone conversion rate so far is dead last in the NFL. More than half, or exactly half, of their points so far this season have come on Nick Folk field goals. That'll work against the team like the Jets. It'll probably work against, I don't know, maybe half of the teams in the NFL. You're going up against Tom Brady and this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. You're not going to win scoring 1 touchdown and kicking 4 field goals or whatever that is. The Patriots are going to have to finish these drives, going to have to get some of these drives into the end zone. And I think that's where you look at guys like Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. Jonnu Smith, his game last week was one of the worst by a Patriots pass catcher that I've seen in a long time. 1 catch, 6 targets, 4 yards, struggled as a blocker, had a penalty, had a couple of drops. I liked the way, the mindset that he came out of it with. We talked to him this week. He really seems like he has his head in the right place going into that. But Patriots spent a lot of money on these 2 tight ends so far. Red zone, 2 receptions between the 2 of them, both by Jonnu Smith, no touchdowns for them. That's something that's going to have to change this week.
Yeah, the one thing I would say as we sort of head out of the offensive portion, just keep in mind that you're chasing another group that generally scores at a pretty high rate. Keep a count out there, folks, if you're watching play count and just numbers of series. If you look at the games where the Bucs just blow people out of the water, you can't have what we saw last week where we had some series where the Patriots were on the field for like 40 seconds, right? Like, that's just literally untenable. You cannot survive in that. This is a really good defense the Patriots have that we're about to get in here to in a second, but you can't ask them to go get a punt, force a stop, even if it's 6 or 8 plays. Hey, Brady might get 2 first downs, but you get a stop and get them to punt, you've won. But if they go get to sit down and come back inside of 60 seconds later, that's a big loss. So I think it might not even be points as much as sustaining length of field, like, you know, really controlling clock and making sure that this isn't just a get your Gatorade, get back in.
And that is a perfect segue. Defensively, what are you going to be looking for in this game, Matt?
Well, so here's the thing. Everyone sit down, cancel your appointments. I'm going to tell you the secret to beating Tom Brady. I mean, that's idiotic, and I think in part, folks have to realize that there's other sort of knuckleheads like me, former players that have been teammates of his, that have spoken sort of ad nauseum about how you do it. I can tell you the formula, and the beauty of this, I know from conversations with Tom, and I know that Tom can know this, that he'll tell you what I'm about to say because the formula is the same and everyone always says this. And there are seeds of truth to this, but he knows you know it, and he knows that's what people are going to be trying to tempt. You got to get him off the spot. That's the phrase everyone uses. Off the spot means it's not just pressure. Side pressure doesn't affect him as much. He sees stuff go by. Perif does just brushes it off. It's preventing him from stepping up, right? So you need to be we talked about this last week, a real big Barmore game.
Yep.
You need him off the spot. You need people who win, basically B gap to B gap. So getting him off the spot is absolutely critical. It helps. Doesn't guarantee anything, but it helps. The other portion is you're going to have to disguise. And this is something that is very important to have depth in your group, from the defensive backfield to other linebackers to your rush group, because when you say, hey, you just can't show them what you got, everyone's got to disguise. Disguise takes energy. I've been on teams and been in games where they told us we're going to do that. And when they tell you they're going to disguise, that means you're moving around pre-snap. Most guys rest pre-snap. If they're going to ask you to pop in and out, if I'm look like I'm coming, spinning safeties, moving back and forth, in and out of press, that stuff takes energy. You need that approach because if you stand in your coverage, Tom knows what you're running. He's going to pick the appropriate portion and pick you apart with it. But the other thing is, if you want to be one of those disguise teams and then you do the disguise and then you get 8 or 12 plays in and you don't have the right bodies to substitute, end of series, and when disguise heavy times, that's when he kills you as well. So you got to be able to rotate goes through, and you can't tell him exactly what it is, and you got to get him off the spot. And ideally you take the football away from him. But one of the curious things that I did find out, he didn't turn the ball over last week, and puts up 430 yards. So it's not just getting the ball off Tom. And this is why it sucks. This is why you can't say here's how you beat him, because there really isn't one. He's had several bad losses a year ago where he had multi-pick games, and that was like part of it. But he also had some games, mild output games. The Rams seem to be like the team they can't beat, 27-24 kind of things where there aren't many turnovers. So it's not as if there's some real formula, but you certainly can't beat yourself, and you certainly can't not at least attempt those things that at least make life harder. It doesn't necessarily beat them, but it just doesn't give it away.
Yeah, absolutely, and you mentioned the depth. The depth is a bit of a question mark going into this game for the Patriots defensively. Juwan Bentley, Josh Uche, Kyle Van Noy, linebackers, all listed as questionable. Yep. Also Kyle Duggar and J.C. Jackson, their number 1 cornerback. All of those guys are questionable coming into this game. The Patriots bumped up 2 defenders from the practice squad. Yep. So you will see Miles Bryant and Jelani Tavai out there today, whether that's due to an injury or because of one of those aforementioned players isn't going to be playing.
Right.
Whether that's just additional depth in those groups remains to be seen. But yeah, certainly going to be something worth monitoring in this game. Dakota, defensively, what are you looking for?
Well, actually, before I get to my point, I actually had a question for Matt. Obviously, as someone who played, I just think in general, one of the ways that you're going to have success against Tom Brady is by constantly spinning the dial. You can't just do the same defense the entire game, because he's going to figure it out.
Yeah.
He's going to wind up having success. And within that, consistently getting pressure up the middle. So I'm just curious, like for you, what are some of the more creative ways that a team can come up with getting pressure up the middle, like maybe playing someone like Matt Judon out of position or something like that?
Well, so think about what Tom's biggest gripe has been since training camp. This big new rule with the NFL about who's wearing what number. Right? Why does that mean so much to him? Because of his personal uncertainty with who's coming and who to call out as the mic and how the protection should be set. So the greater thing is, like, you could literally run the same coverage and the same pressure, but have different people within that be the pressure and be the portions of coverage. So you need safeties who can play the corners role. You need corners who can just bail and end up in 4 or either 2 or even 5 and play man. I'm getting too much in the weeds here, but the point of it is you need to be able to be variable, and part of it is just not showing him what you're going to do and being, you use the phrase, sort of spin the dial. You don't want to come out in a series and look down at your call sheet after and say, that was a 12-play drive. We did get off. We got to stop in the red zone. But you know what? We ran the same coverage 10 of those 12 plays. Right. They go to the sideline. He comes back and goes, they're living in cover 4. Right. Byron, pump me with 4-beaters, right? And that's how this works. So you got to be able to play a lot of stuff throughout the day, and you got to be different series to series or half to half. Watch the series when they come out from the halftime show.
Well, I'm glad you brought the X and O's, because my take is a little bit more just black and white. I just want to see somebody make a play. And someone on the Stevens go out and make a big play. Listen, they have 5 turnovers this season, all interceptions. They haven't forced a fumble yet. But and I don't want to take anything away from the players, because Jonathan Jones' interception, he made a great play on the sideline. The J.C. Jackson, Devin McCourty tip drill was a great play. But most if not all of those interceptions were unforced errors by the quarterback. Tua Tagovailoa, that was a terrible play by him. And Zach Wilson, we all saw what happened. And I just don't think you're going to get those kind of mistakes from Tom Brady in this game. So someone on this defense has to go out and just make a better play than the other guy, because a lot of things are going to have to go right if you're going to win this game. And one of those, I think, is win the turnover battle, which you usually can't expect to do facing a Tom Brady team, but you're going to have to do something like that. So I just want to see somebody on this defense go out and just make a big game-changing play, because I just think you're going to need it.
What I'm going to be looking for is, it's simple, just how does Bill Belichick and Steve Belichick and Gerard Mayo, how do they defend Brady? It's something that we've really kind of been wondering for a couple of years, even when they were still together. How, if Bill Belichick played against Tom Brady, what would he do? Because we've seen for years, for decades really, Bill Belichick be able to successfully, if not neutralize, at least limit some of these all-time iconic quarterbacks. You saw it with Peyton Manning way back when. You saw it with Aaron Rodgers. You saw it with Patrick Mahomes. All of these guys, they come into a game against the Patriots defense, and they don't typically have the type of performances that they do against other teams. And a lot has been made this week about Tom Brady knowing this Patriots team and this Patriots defense better than anybody. He said earlier this week on his podcast that he knows exactly what the Patriots are going to throw at him in this game. Maybe he's right on that, but also nobody knows Tom Brady's strengths and weaknesses more than Bill Belichick and this coaching staff. So that's just going to be a fascinating chess matchup, whatever you want to call it. I'm just really interested to see it.
I forgot one of my sort of Brady points, and it's really kind of what you're talking about, what Bill knows and how he might defend it. I can't tell you the play call they're going to do, but there's, in addition to the get him off the spot, in addition to some of the other ways you would defend him, you also defend inside out. I know I reminded myself of this as I kind of felt this breeze hitting us. There's a chance of slight rain possibly, but we've got a little bit of rain here, or excuse me, of wind here. It's important to defend inside out. I know this is something that Bill has preached about endlessly, especially with a guy like Peyton, or if you get Aaron Rodgers. The last thing you want to do with a guy like Tom is just let him take over the middle of the field, right? So all of these points we're making are about making it a little harder. It doesn't mean that Tom can't, complete a deep comeback. Of course he can. It doesn't mean that Tom can't win to the outside. Of course he can. But those are harder throws. So the last thing you want to do is let him be on the spot, not mix things, stand in your coverage, and then let him have the easy ones as opposed to the more difficult ones. If Tom's ripping 18-yard outs and 15-yard comebacks and all this stuff, okay, yeah, you won. But expect them to defend inside out. It's probably the best bet you have.
And with the current status of this Patriots secondary, you don't want this receiving core to be able to just kind of run free downfield for 3, 4, 5 seconds every play and have Tom Brady just standing in the pocket. I mean, the Bucs won't have Rob Gronkowski in this game, but they still have Mike Evans. They still have Chris Godwin. They're getting Antonio Brown back. Patriots obviously still do not have Stephon Gilmore, and they have a guy in J.C. Jackson who popped up on the injury report yesterday, or the other day, may not be quite 100%. That is a mismatch in the favor of the visitors here in this game. So I definitely don't think the Patriots are going to be able to sit back and just let Tom Brady kind of have all the time in the world to work back there. But we will finish, as always, with our choice of the game. The lines moved a little bit this week, opened at 5.5, got up to 7, just dropped back down to 6.5. The over-under is 49.5 as of this taping. Matt, betting-wise, how are you feeling about this?
Team unders, I think, what are we, like 6-0 pregame and also these first few games. So I'm going to roll with it, 49.5. I don't want to put a sort of dark cloud over this. I don't anticipate the Patriots winning this game. I think it would be a massive upset, but if they're able to, they may actually play it a little closer than that 6.5 points. But I think your safest bet today is game style, and that's what we're betting on, game style. Keeping Brady's group to a high 20s number, maybe even a low 30s, and still staying underneath that 49.5, I think is something that's quite plausible. Some of the other stuff, beating the spread, I don't know if that's quite the same. So I'll stay team unders for now until I'm wrong.
Dakota?
Yeah, for me, I've had decent success this season with the player props. I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to go Mac Jones over 259.5 passing yards.
Ooh, okay.
And he got 281 in week 1 against Miami and 270, I believe, last weekend against the Saints. I think both those games we'd say passing offense didn't play well. I mean, he looked well. in certain parts, but the passing offense wasn't really up to speed, a lot of mistakes, and I think we'd say conservative play calling to some degree. And so maybe you get some of that this game, but I also think whether it's in garbage time or just the fact that they have to keep up with the Bucs offense, they're going to have to air it out a lot. And I think he gets well over 259.5 passing yards. And also, real quick, I think it's 37.5 pass attempts. I think he goes over that as well. He's going to have to if they're going to win this game.
I agree with both of those bets, so I'm going to steal one of them for myself. I also like the under in this game. I've been trying to talk myself into a Patriots upset this week, and I
have too.
And
I
do think there have been a lot of circumstances that have fallen in the Patriots' favor between no Rob Gronkowski in this game, all the injuries that the Bucs have in their secondary, which I do think the Patriots can exploit even with a rookie quarterback, but not confident enough in it quite to go with that, so I'm going to go with the under. I do think that I would be a little bit surprised if Bill Belichick, if Tom Brady was able to put up 45 points against a Bill Belichick coach defense, even if he does end up winning this game, which is widely expected. I saw recently that something like 98% of the public money in this game is on the Bucs. So the Patriots are heavy underdogs in pretty much every way, shape, and form. But I do like that under bet for this game. That will do it for this week's NESN Pregame Chat. You can follow me on Twitter at Zack Cox NESN. You can follow Dakota at Dakota Randall NESN. You can follow Matt at CHATHAM58. And of course, you can follow along with all of our Patriots coverage on NESN.com.